Today's Audit Committee meeting. It is now time to start. Can you confirm we are live streamed?
We are live streaming, Chairman.
Thank you. We hopefully will be joined by a BDO from a direct IT link. I would like to deal with issues from last minutes with regards to BDO's comments as soon as they arrive. They haven't arrived yet, but as soon as they do, I'd like to move directly to that if everybody's okay. Right, so apologies for absence.
We've received no apologies, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Minutes of the last meeting, 15th of December 2022, have been circulated. Is everybody okay with those minutes? Yep.
Chair, are you taking them as whether I'm prepared to propose them, but you brought up an issue surrounding you wish, as you wish?
At the moment, all I need is, are you agree with the accuracy of those minutes?
I do indeed.
Right. Okay. Yep. Okay. We agree that those minutes are an accurate record. So as and when BDO arrive, I will look at what aspect matters arriving.
Chairman, they have arrived in the stream now.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So I'll go on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from any member? I'll take that as no. We'll move on to questions on notice under Council Rule Procedure 38. Are there?
We received none at this point, Chairman.
Thank you. I'll now, if I may, go to matters arising from the minutes of the 15th of December 2022. I believe we have someone from BDO online. Would you like to talk to us? Hello.
Hi there.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Before we sort of go on further, I'd just like to discuss a comment that was made by you at our last meeting in December. And that was regards to you had some concern about undisclosed directorships. You were going to finish your investigations and either edit that out or give some context around that. Are you able to update us?
Yes, of course. So we have gone back and investigated that further, and we've closed that matter now as not being an issue. What we will be doing is updating the audit completion report that will come to the next committee to remove that point out of that report.
Okay, thanks for that. That's given some explanation around that. And the last comment on that minute was that you've now increased your staffing on our particular audit to complete it in January 2023. Well, I think you've got about 3 days. So perhaps you give us an update as to where we are with that.
Yes, of course. I appreciate that we did plan to obviously be in a position to start finalising the audit process this month. Unfortunately, we are behind on that. We are putting all our resources on it, and it is absolute priority for both Aphrodite, the RI, and I to get this done in February. We had a catch up with Richard Barrett yesterday just to go through kind of the key outstandings, and these are just around some internal queries that we're dealing with regards to property valuation. It's nothing to highlight as a concern. Nothing wrong with the figures as such. It's just more for documentation on our files. So we are hoping to be done in February, and the plan is to bring an audit completion report, which should have all the final conclusions in the March 2023 committee.
Right, so we can rely on you providing that for our next meeting in March.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Obviously, we are still concerned as a committee with regards to our opinion. None of us are experts, as we've said before.
Yeah.
We lean heavily on our external auditors, providing us with opinion on especially financial strategy and financial forecast.
Yeah.
Have you any concerns around anything that you've looked at so far?
Not at all. So in terms of obviously a key area and things that we look at as part of the audit is around estimates and valuations, and there's nothing of significant concern that's coming out. So that's good. In terms of looking from, I'd say, more of a value for money aspect, whilst we haven't formally reported on that, the work is ongoing throughout the period. So we would be reviewing minutes. We're having regular strategy kind of update and liaison calls with Richard to understand how the planning is and forecasting and how that's all turning out. So I think our general feeling is that tendering as a council is a lot more risk averse than other councils. So we're not uncomfortable with anything that's going on. It's all well planned out and well thought out.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that obviously gives us some reassurance, but obviously we need documentation to be able to support all that.
Yeah.
And as we are nearing towards election times, it's essential for us as the sitting committee to actually get this resolved and finalised before the elections and a new committee sits.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Richard, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think I said no, and I'm going to talk about something, aren't I? So yes, I have in that sense. And so I think it's just a case of no, thank you for that update. Really, really helpful. I think the conversation we had yesterday was we'd like to think we're finished before the Marches committee. So the Marches committee be a more formality to bring those paperwork back. So as soon as we finish, we will update the committee via email to say it's finished, and if any major issues, which we appreciate, there's nothing emerging to date, touch wood. So we'll provide that kind of pragmatic update. But I think also on the youth resources assessment, I think it's worth sort of highlighting again is that the accounts are 2021. The youth resources assessment will be much more up to date than that. It's not looking back to 2021. It will clearly have its roots in 2021, but as Tash was saying there is, it will actually take into account anything we've done so far to date. So it's not an out of date assessment. It will be the most up to date assessment, which I think is about May time. We should be getting that. So it does fit nicely with the new administration, new committee as well. So I think that's positive to say that rather than it being assumed it's going to be out of date information when it arrives, because it won't be.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. That's good to know. We did receive a communication from BDO on the 17th of January, and that was outlining the reasons for the delays for the next audit, I believe. So there are already some delays built into that, but as Richard said, it will be good to get this finalised and complete within February so that we can, in our March meeting, just formalise the acceptance of that final report. And you can give us that assurance.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Steady.
Thanks, Chair. How have we got in this position? Is it one purely of staff? I understand from the letter concerning other audits, but I'm just a bit concerned that we slipped from, it was going to be done in January, now we're back in February. And if you remember, I did actually ask the question, didn't I? What is plan B if we don't meet the January deadline? So now the plan B is February. And it could be a plan C because that could go to March. And then we're going to look at plan D because that could go to May to be. I'm just a little bit concerned that, you know, it's slip. And is it just purely that you haven't got enough staff? And if you haven't got enough staff, why wasn't it flagged up earlier?
Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so I guess it's probably a number of things. The key thing probably being around the auditor resourcing. Obviously, why it's significant BDO is across all kind of public sector, all within the firms. So it's not just BDO specific, it is across all of the firms. And I think what PSAA are finding is the deadlines are too tight, and we've just got into a position where the auditor turnaround is just quite high. And then built into that, all public sector auditors usually do NHS audits as well. So for specifically this year, for example, we've got 2 sets of NHS audits to do. There's just a lot going on, and I think there's just a big catch-up exercise going on at the moment.
Yeah, I think we understand the pressures. Obviously, we have to be concerned for tendering, and that is our only concern. We do understand your other pressures. The only thing I would say is that we're not the only local authority in this position. I can't remember what the percentages of local authorities are which are in this position, but it's not small, is it, Richard?
No, I think at the moment, I think it might change now, but I think when we last, I think there's 600. So this is a national issue that needs resolving. The letter that's attached as well to the report, or the table of outstanding issues report, that brings this sort of response to this matter as well, is there's 2 ways of tackling it, isn't there? Is that additional capacity is really quite important, but also the level of work that we have to produce that then needs to be audited. I think that's what frustrates me, is that, you know, if we're producing 52 more pages of our accounts, the auditors have got to audit 52 more pages of the accounts. There's got to be something here. The letter that's on the attached, I've gone on ahead, so apologies, but the letter is quite important because it is recognised by the government that there's a massive issue. We're not seeing a solution emerge. That's the frustrating thing. We all know it's capacity, we all know it's the work we do, and we all recognise it, but we're not seeing where that's moving on. So for me, it's much more of a frustration just generally about how do we resolve it going forward, because we do need to do this nationally. And I just say I can't see the solution coming forward.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I mean, it's small comfort to know that we're part of a bigger problem, but it doesn't help us resolving the problem, unfortunately. We have letters from the government departments of levelling up housing and communities with lots of platitudes, but there isn't much in the way of answers and solutions, unfortunately. So we are where we are. It's really frustrating. And I think it's just important that we as an audit committee make sure that the public understand that we have that frustration, and we ask you to come regularly to this meeting and explain what the circumstances are. We've been given assurance that it will be complete and finalised in February, and in our March meeting, it will be a formality to sign that off and agree it. And we have the assurance from BDO. Not much more we can say on that, I don't think. Okay. Lovely. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your time. That's been helpful. And we'll wave you goodbye. Right, okay, back to our agenda. Item 5, report of the Internal Audit Manager on pages 5 to 18. And we go over to Craig.
Thank you, Chairman. If I take you to page 9 of the report, and that sort of sets out the progress from the internal audit team. It's not a lot to report for me this period, which is quite nice. I've not got anything significant to put in front of you. We've completed 9 audits since the last committee, which is roughly around where we were this time last year. We are, I'd say, a little bit behind, mainly probably because of me, have just not been able to put that extra bit of time in for the quality assessments, but we've got audits waiting to go out. It's just they're waiting for me to check them before they go out. But we're at a place where I'm comfortable. We were here this time last year, and I'm not worried about not completing enough audits by the end of the year to give an opinion. So
rather than you go through the document, Craig, that we've all had, I've got some questions, and I'm sure other members have got a few questions as well. If we deal with those, it's probably easier, isn't it?
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. My first question is on page 9, and that's around the resourcing. And obviously, we were looking to do a structure of shared apprenticeship schemes. That looks as though it's fallen by the wayside. Just give us an update as to where we are with resourcing.
Yeah, so we tried something new. I'd spoken to the rest of the heads of audits across Essex to see if there was an appetite to share resource for an apprentice to get them experience in all the different areas. There was at first, but then we've now sort of spoken about it, and that appetite has kind of dwindled a bit. So there's not enough councils that want to be part of it to make it worthwhile. So we're going back to recruiting our own apprentice internally now, and hope to have someone in place within the next couple of months, because of the time period it takes to go through the whole process itself.
But if you could just keep us up to speed with that. Resourcing is always a concern of ours, and just making sure that everything's okay. Maurice.
Thank you, Chair. Previous meetings, and if I had taken the information correctly from our officer, that a part of the shared apprenticeship route with the other authorities made a substantial part of the financing for the whole of the project. Well, did I hear that correctly? Will this have any financial impact on us now we're going down this route?
No financial impact. I mean, the way it would have worked originally, we would have all recruited under our own budgets, and then it would have just been a development where we shared. They learned from each council, so there's no changes to the actual financial impact.
Yeah. It was just an observation. I think where other authorities don't want to be part of the. So I don't know how many members went on to the devolution webinar. It's all about sharing resources and sharing services. So obviously, this is against what the devolution aspiration is, I would guess. So do you think we should make a comment about this on our minutes to say, this could, certainly significantly affect the devolution process? And has that been taken into account?
I'm not sure we know enough about what any devolution processes are at the moment to make a firm judgment. But I mean, I accept the point that if we're trying to have collaborative actions, they don't seem to be working terribly well. But we are where we are, and all we're going to do is just try and recruit our own people and move forward. I think if we wait around for the government to actually supply us with details about how devolution is going to work, we'll be waiting for a long while, I think. So.
The leader chairs the devolution process and the discussion. So I'm just thinking, shouldn't we be flagging it up at that level, not rather than government, but we should be flagging it up to the discussions what are going in, which is going across the pan with all the other leaders and chief executives. Then this could be a potential problem. Is this the only situation where it goes against the devolution ethos, if you like? So I think I'm just saying, should we not flag it up for them to take on board?
How do members feel about it?
I do tend to agree with Councillor Steady on this. At this present moment in time, with the answer from yourself, Craig, the impact is minimal over the decision not to go with other authorities, but with the amalgamation of the authorities through devolution and one single head from the whole of Essex, I can see that there could be some kind of a long-term strategy, and maybe we should be looking at it now rather than waiting until later on.
Okay, well, perhaps if we make the comment to the leader who sits on that that particular group that an attempt at collaboration has not worked, and perhaps he'd just like to draw his attention to that. Delith.
Thank you, because I'm touching everything with both hands. Very sorry. First, my apologies for being late, Chairman. I am telling other people to drive me at the moment. My issue is different to both these people. I have concerns about how many apprentices were we thinking of to work across other authorities? And also, am I right in thinking that for this type of role, we would be looking at a more mature apprentice that perhaps has already got possibly even graduate qualifications, but hasn't got any postgraduate professional qualifications that allows them, because if it's the latter, then the concern I have isn't really a concern, because they may be able to drive and, go to Colchester or Chelmsford or whatever. If it's the former, that it's not that, I would have concerns about sharing an apprentice, and also I would be interested to know how long this apprenticeship term would be, and because wouldn't we be almost be able to put an investment in with the intention of retaining that one apprentice onto our own workforce in the future? Thank you, Chairman. That's a multiple questions. Sorry.
I'm not sure that Craig will be able to answer too much of that, because a lot of it is HR, I suspect. But
I'd like to come back in on that. So this had never been done before. So a few of us heads of audits, we were looking at a way of ensuring the education of the apprentice is better than what we can currently provide. So if we recruit an apprentice at the moment, they will only ever see the audits or get to look at what we do here at Tendring. And this had never been done before. So we were talking about whether or not, if they were to spend, say, 2 weeks working for the county council, or a few weeks working on specific audits for another council somewhere else in Essex, it's experiences that they wouldn't normally get, and it helps their sort of development as an auditor, because they get to see things they might not get to normally see. So it was just a way of, there is no framework for this. So we were looking to try and create one, and then maybe if it worked, it might be used elsewhere. But there are good career track schemes and already in place. And I think that's where it's difficult to push that sharing, because Essex County Council have their own career track service. We've got our own. There's other councils that have that. And I think at the moment, the appetite might not be there, because it's just easier for them to do it that way, because they've got their own frameworks already. So for us smaller councils, for me, I thought it would be a good experience for someone who's learning to get to see how things work elsewhere, because it helps with their knowledge base. But unfortunately, the timing probably just isn't right at the moment. I think that's probably what the main issue around it is. And if devolution does come in and things start to change, then maybe we might have more opportunity later on to do that. But at the moment, it's probably more timing than anything else.
Just responded to, paints a different picture for me. You're talking about possibly us taking on this apprentice. It'll be our apprentice, but that the other authorities that are in partnership with us take them for secondment. And we would pay back and take theirs if they've got to. So I can see that model working, but I couldn't see how the other model worked unless we were having a mature 21 or 22-year-old, on board. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, just a comment, Chairman, in relation to Graham's point. I see no issue in making notes to say that that's being taken into account, but I do think we're at an early stage to be thinking about it. That was all.
Thank you. Sorry.
Sorry, further point, just on page 10, I'm on management response to internal audit findings. There are processes in place, it starts there. Can you give a little bit more information around what those processes are and what sort of corrective, how did the corrective actions feed into what you next are looking at in terms of audit, and where appropriate, follow-up audits have been arranged to revisit significant issues, but there's no issues being found on this particular report.
So every audit, we if we have findings and recommendations, they're all recorded. They go off to the service, and dependent on the severity, will depend on how quickly we follow up on the issues that are outstanding. So any audit that receives a satisfactory level of assurance where there are some moderate or minor issues, we don't report to this committee because they're things that we deal with within the service, and that you might get a longer time to deal with that because the impact isn't as significant as what we would class as the significant stuff that we bring here. So there is always that follow-up process where our system will chase the responsible officers when the due dates are coming up and say, where are you at? Can you provide evidence that you've done this? And that works quite well. If we don't get that evidence, then we raise it here. We raise it with them, and we try and get those issues resolved so that we don't have to escalate it. But that process is always ongoing. So we're always speaking to the service. The significant findings that we report here, we chase up on those all the time, constantly getting updates, trying to make sure that they're resolved as quickly as possible, because if they weren't that significant, we wouldn't be raising them here for you to see and it be transparent about what's going on. So that process is always ongoing. So we wouldn't sign off any findings unless there is evidence to support that they've made the changes and that they've implemented what we asked of them.
Okay. Craig, just to confirm, Defo operations still under internal review, still looking at that?
Yeah, so as we reported at the last committee, some of the significant issues which I've given a brief update from the last committee. Damien Williams came to give us an update I believe in September. I think he said he'll be due back to come back in March to give us more of an update on progress. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update of what we've had from the service so far, because we are sort of asking for those updates, even though it's not due until March time. We still want to know how they're progressing.
No, it's good, and we will welcome the corporate director or assistant director coming to our March meeting. Yeah, thanks for that. On page 11, you're asking for the external quality assessment to be delayed. Can I just say, first of all, when do you anticipate it will happen?
So at this stage, I would hope to start progressing it roughly September 2023, just because we have to have a 5-year assessment, which we've had the previous one. and because of the sort of busy period of year end and elections and everything coming up at the moment, the timing just it would be difficult having someone come in for which could be up to 5 days, just intensely looking at everything, and it would take our focus away from other things. So it's just me. The impact for me is low of not having it, because we have an annual assessment anyway, and we report to you any issues or any findings that we might see in comparison to those standards. So it's just asking whether or not we can push that back a little bit later so that we've got the time available.
I've got no problem with that being delayed. We have our annual assessment and the external quality assessment. A slight delay on that, can't imagine will cause us problems. Everybody okay with that? Yeah. The other point of that, Craig, I was just going to ask you to just give us a little bit of a context about that. How does that actually happen? Looking at our experience with our external auditors, are we going to be able to secure anybody to actually carry out this work?
Well, I mean, that's what I've got to look into. So it would be a procurement exercise. We'll have to go out and find, because it's not a cheap service. We've got to find the money to pay for someone to come in and spend that time doing it. So there'll be a procurement exercise to find out who can do it, when they can do it, and I'll come back to you with who it will be once we've gone through that process.
And we got a budget for that, I take it?
Sorry?
We have a budget for that?
We don't have a specific budget for it, but the money we should have the money available, because we've been holding a vacancy for so long that money should be there. So
it's a service we don't have much choice about, so the budget will have to be found, I'm sure. Okay. Going on to the internal audit plan report. I don't have there's much on there. The only thing I just wanted to talk about, your list is having consultancy work still with Career Track. Is this taking up much of your time?
No, so I've got it down as consultancy, but in terms of days that we spend on it now, we haven't spent any time with Career Track for some time now. So
that's all manageable. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
In terms of the table, I've got nothing else. Anybody else want to query anything? No. Okay, I think we've come to an end there. I'll ask you to go back to page 5 for the vote, but to note to the leader of the council with regards to collaboration with other authorities regarding apprenticeships has not been successful in drawing that to his attention. You happy with that? Yeah. Okay, and we can sign those recommendations on page 5. We agree those? We do? Okay. Great stuff. Right, we move on. Agenda item 6. Table of outstanding issues. Karen will be taking us through those. I have a question on page 21. That's implication for the council's aim to be net zero by 2013. We're going to have an update. Is that scheduled for March?
Yes, that's scheduled with the relevant corporate director for March, Chair, if you're still happy with that.
So is that Tim Clark's going to come and talk to us?
Lee Healy, potentially accompanied by Tim Clark, and they'll be able to provide a full update on that.
Okay. March could be a good full agenda, couldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Should we bring a sleeping bag and sandwiches? Because we seem to be having quite a big agenda that day, and will we be able to fulfil the role of that agenda within the time span given, within the hours?
I think we will. It happens occasionally, doesn't it, where we just have to put a bit more on an agenda, and that happens. Under the Redmond review item on page 22, we've got a sort of a letter from the Department of Levelling Up Houses and Communities, page 33 in your bundle. I mean, I've written on that, and I don't know if you'd share my view. Lots of aspirations, but no timescales or sustainability. I mean, it just doesn't really say anything. The government intends to formally establish ALGA through primary legislation preceded by shadow system leader arrangements at the FRC. Yeah, okay, that's fine. And I wonder when that's going to happen, what year. And they're going to impose an independent member to each planning committee. When and what will that independent member's qualifications be? I'm not even going to ask you to comment on that, Karen, because I'm sure you don't know any more than I do. But it just seems to think that this has been going on for months and months now. Redden Review sat and produced findings, what, 2 years ago? And we're no further forward with that at all. But there's not much more we can say about that, is there? Moving on then, page 22, planning enforcement. John is here with us. He's very kindly stepped out of his normal workload to come give us a bit of an update on where we are with planning enforcement. Before he does, the reason I've asked him to be here is planning enforcement is something that all members get beaten up about all the time. It's the one thing that members of the public are very, very concerned about. With regards to the remit of this committee, it is an area where there is potential reputational risk and potentially financial risk to the organisation as well if we don't actually deal with things as we should do. We have had some problems with planning enforcement, and I hope John's going to give us some enlightening news.
So, well, where to start, really? Ultimately, we have a number of changes in the last year with the introduction of the enforcement policy, and it's kind of given us a criteria to work to. Now, I also appreciate that enforcement policy is automatically going to be reviewed very soon with some changes to it, because we've already found some of it needs a little bit of tweaking, but ultimately that has given us a guideline. It's given us a guideline in targets. It's given a guideline in some procedures, and in a way to demonstrate to members priorities that the enforcement team will take forward from this point onwards. So we had over 500 enforcement inquiries about 8 months ago. We closed and reviewed a lot of those. A lot of those were just recorded incorrectly, if I'm perfectly honest. We got that down to about 300. At this moment in time, we're down to 258 inquiries. 80 of those are still in terms of breach of occupancy conditions with regard to various holiday parks within the district. So we've made quite a lot of progress to bring the historic workload down to something that is more manageable. Obviously, new cases have come forward under the new enforcement policy. They obviously now given a priority as set out by the policy. They are regarded as green, amber, or red. So there is a process now being adopted slowly in respect of the new cases, but we still have that historical backlog of 250 to look through and update and data cleanse as well, which is an ongoing job. We are also turning our attention to more proactive work. We recently visited a holiday park just up the road to look at what's going on there, and we will be dealing with that as a separate matter in the coming year to come forward to members with what we feel might be the strategy that we should adopt for those as well. In recruitment terms, we do still have a reliance on agency workers, which is something we wish to change. We appointed a new team manager as a permanent member of staff, and I've been working closely with him. But ultimately, we do need feet on the ground as well. We have a recruitment over Christmas, and we are shortlisting now. I think we've got about 6 candidates for permanent posts that we're interviewing next week. So I'm hopeful some of those will be successful, and so we have the personnel at that point onwards to invest and work with and develop the enforcement service going forward. So that's a summary, if you like.
Yeah, thanks for that, John. Some of our concerns were that the department couldn't see the wood for the trees in that you've got a massive amount on a database, but it wasn't being updated or sanitized, and you couldn't really tell where you were with what was going on. I'm pleased that you've now got a new supervisor, and who seems to be getting grip with things, and we're in the process of recruiting permanent staff, which will also be a bonus. So we look forward to an update as to where we are. Do you anticipate that the task and finish group report will impinge on any of the policy?
So I think there is a proposal to make some changes to the policy. Mostly the changes I've seen in discussions with Gary Guyver has been around the harm assessment side of that. Ultimately, what we want on the ground is a practical and robust toolkit to use that both the public and ourselves understand and can clearly explain when needed, and it acts as a record for each case and why we close it or why we've gone forward to take further action. We're almost there with that. I think there was just a few bits of that document that when we look back at it, we weren't quite clear about what its intent was, if I could put it that way. So we've made some changes to that, which we wish to progress forward. And I think once we've got that finalised, we can then consistently use that and consistently demonstrate what we've done with each case and allow members indeed to understand what we've done when we've done it and the priority we've given it. And I think that ultimately is part of our remit, is to give members the ability to explain our actions as much as we explain our actions, because you are ultimately at the front line in many cases when people come to you to discuss their concerns.
Yeah, okay. Maurice?
Thank you. John, when this was first brought before the planning committee for to be revised, the planning policy, and I'm part of that planning committee. One of the suggestions that was made outside of the written word was that a quarterly update sheet would be made readily available to the councillors to show them the what outstanding issues and cases are being dealt with now, which would be pertinent to them if they need it. And that was backed up by the deputy leader in a later meeting. Within the completion, is this to go ahead? Will we still see this quarterly, and when will we get it?
So the quarterly update, as I understand it, needs to go to planning committee. The next planning committee could be a time we take that report. One of our delays, and I apologise for that, is that to understand what information to give members is based on the policy of what that sets out, but also what the policy requires is not information that is actually recorded in some circumstances.
Right.
So it's for example, it's very difficult. One of the criteria is to record the start of investigation. We don't actually record a start of investigation. We record a receipt of the inquiry, but when does the investigation start? So we've had to look at what does that mean. Another concern is the harm assessment. We're supposed to report on when that's completed. we don't record in the system when that's completed. So I can't pull out information to be able to give you. So in many respects, the enforcement policy is useful in that it gives us a criteria, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different statistics that I'm supposed to provide members with. The trouble with that is a lot of those are not actually recorded yet. So there is a change in process in the background for when officers set up a case, that they actually record the data necessary into our system, so that when we come back to you quarterly, we can pull that data out and easily say, we had X many of this was done in time, this many times, and so on. We can give you a robust report. I think what I'm going to end up doing probably this next time round for the next committee is probably only give you what I can give you. And I'll have to work back from that for the following once some of the processes have changed. But we haven't instantaneously changed processes. And I hate to say it, part of the reason for that is we have a reliance on agency staff who are there just to do as their contract requires them to do, rather than invest and change the system that we are working with.
I imagine that will come out in the scrutiny report.
Yep.
From the task and finish. Delith, you had a query.
Chairman, I'm struggling to hear, so I don't know if it's me. I hope my ears are not packing in on me as well, or I might as well be blinking thing. But I'm concerned. Can you confirm at the moment for us what the staffing is as of now? Because I know you have successfully appointed a new planning enforcement supervisor, manager, whatever. You've said you're going to be recruiting next week, and there'll be substantive posts, I hope. And so where are we at the moment in actual numbers at the moment?
So we have a team leader. We have 2 or 3. Hang on. So we've got 2 technicians, 1 team leader, and then we've got 2 planning officer, enforcement officer level that are both agency. That's what we've got at the moment.
Right. And my second issue is that I'm not quite sure what this report you're talking about is, because I don't sit on planning. And am I right in thinking that the report you're talking about is for the planning committee members? Then I would put a plea in as someone who has, as recently as the last few months, 4 months or so, had at least 4, if not 5, quite serious enforcement issues in my ward. I need to be updated with every respect, because otherwise I lose the plot. Because I like to go back to residents every sort of month, or whoever's reported something to me in confidentiality. I like to keep them informed. Is it possible, without creating, there's no point creating a lot of extra work for your officers, because that defeats the thing of having them in post. But is it possible, because this is bigger than planning. Planning, you get, you sit in the committee, you make decisions, and you get fed all the information you need to know. But ward councillors also need to take these things seriously and be as proactive as possible on the issues in the ward to work with your officers. Is it possible to have some sort of system where, ward members, if there are enforcement issues, I might go a year or longer without any, and then bang, that there is a means of feedback, even if it's quarterly or something.
So the requirement of the enforcement policy is to update the inquirer every 21 days. So if you are the person who have put the complaint to us, you should be updated 21. The change that we're proposing is that it's not just the first 21 days, but it's an ongoing every 21 days. Now, I know that hasn't happened up until recently, where we've started to put that into the system now. The biggest problem, I think, and it's not an excuse, it's simply a case of when you as an officer, and you have a caseload of 70 cases, you have got almost, I think, 21 days for every single one of those cases, and to make sure that an update goes out. So we've had to find a way to make the computer automatically remind us as part of our process to make sure that that task is done. We've also had the other issue where previous officers have thought there's no need for an update when there's nothing's happened. Well, ultimately,
I found decisions have come out formally back to, say, town council. If I wasn't
Right.
the town council, I'd be even more ignorant, if I'm honest, of this.
right. Okay.
I think John's explained that there will be a better system
Yeah,
for
yeah,
informing
you.
members.
Because I think it is needed if we're going to be effective in our wards.
One of my remits when I was employed was to look at the efficiencies of the current uniform and enterprise system that we've got, and how that can automate a lot of tasks. I am still in the middle of doing that in terms of both DM, enforcement, and building control, but it is a large task. Ultimately, when we moved away from paper, but we didn't update the process of how to deal with a case within the computer system, as it were, to go virtual. So a lot of work is still going on in terms of process mapping, both enforcement, DM, and building control, to put these pieces in place to make sure that we are updating members, because something triggers us to do that. Before, you moved a file around into one box to the next one and you knew where things were. When you're working virtually, you've got to have a different roadmap, that you have triggers given to you in a different way. And I think case management is a key part of that, and certainly a key part of my job for the next year.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
I'll move on to Zoe.
Thank you. Strangely, my question was going to be about how the team were finding this sort of crossover period with, and you've explained it incredibly well. I think it's you cannot underestimate the reputational impact of not following enforcement properly, but it's really good to hear about the processes that you are setting in place, and the more information that we have about that process as councillors, the more we can be repetitive with queries that we're getting from members of the public. The more confident and reassured we feel, that comes across to them. Hopefully the less concerns will be raised in some respect, because there will be that understanding that the process is in place and it turns well. But to set those expectations at the earliest possible stage and through councillors is absolutely vital in terms of good outcomes, I would think, for enforcement as a whole. So yeah, the better we understand the process, the sooner we understand the process, and it all clicks in with the crossover period, that is beneficial for us, and I'm sure for you as well.
Sure.
So thank you.
Thank you. Boris.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not exactly sure whether I should be aiming this at the officer or to yourself.
Can I just say before you start, Boris, don't stray into planning committee.
No, I'm not straying into anything at all. I'm keeping what's written on this agenda and staying to what's written on the agenda. Okay. I'm looking at page 22, a little b, under planning enforcement. This is yourself speaking, that we felt that the audit should be carried out for the planning enforcement service. And C, had concerns as to whether the policy had, in fact, been formally adopted, and given the amendment made by the decisions made by the Planning Committee on the 1st of September 2022. My question would be, in an open question, has that audit been carried out, and when will it be carried out? And when will we formally know when the decisions have been made and formally adoption of the policy that the planning committee at that time undertook?
I can't answer B. I'm not aware of any audit being taken forward. In respect of C, I'm working on the basis that it has been formally adopted. I think it was adopted by planning committee on the basis of some alterations being agreed. And I don't believe it was needed to go back to planning committee to then be taken further forward. If there's a legal query in respect of that process, we would have to obviously look to our legal services for review. I'm working on the basis that it has been formally adopted, but that said, we do want to make some changes to it, and it will be coming back anyway for those changes if taken forward.
Happy with that?
Up to a point, yes.
Microphone. Yeah. Do you want to come back on that?
No, I don't.
Right. Okay, thanks for that. I don't think there's any more questions for John. So thank you for coming. It's been very helpful. And perhaps we'll keep a handle on that and update us as with regards to the policy after it's fully implemented and you've got the staff in place, and perhaps Craig will give us an overview of how effective it is. Good. Thanks for coming, John. Appreciate that. Page 23, just to note that our external auditor appointment for 23-24 will be KPMG. So we've got a change of external auditors. It will not be the same one as we're dealing with at the moment. Page 25, my comment on this is that there will be no further training for existing members with regards to audit. It will all the new training will be for the new council. Is that right, Karen?
That's correct, Chair, and it will be in line with the new induction programme as well from 2023.
Okay. Right. Is there any other questions for Karen? I don't think I've got any other questions. Anybody? No? Right, in that case, I will take you back to page 19, where the recommendations are. Only one I would like to add to that, if you're in agreement, that planning enforcement will come back to this committee with regards to its effectiveness and efficiency after the policy is fully implemented and the staff are in place. Okay with that? So, yeah, with that amendment, you're happy with those recommendations? Yeah. Right, thank you. Move on to agenda item 7. Anti-fraud and corruption strategy. And Claire will lead on this one. Should we adopt the same principle or just ask questions rather than ask Claire to go through it all? Yeah. Happy with that? Right, my first question is, I'm sure we're all concerned about this. On page 39, you highlight there that you've got a vacancy at present following an officer leaving the council, currently out for recruitment. Two-part question: what is your current establishment, and how are you progressing with filling that vacancy?
Okay, my full-time equivalent, I have 3 officers, but my duties are quite varied, so those officers can't necessarily overlap. There's only one officer that can overlap with the duties of the vacant post. The vacant post is currently with HR waiting to go out to advert, but we're hoping to recruit by the end of the financial year.
Okay, So on the bottom of that page, you talk about using officers from other jobs. Is that working out okay?
Yes, I have one officer who can overlap with the vacant post, and I have an administrative assistant who's also supporting that. So we're managing at the moment until recruitment happens.
I've got no other questions in that segment. We have with us the anti-fraud and corruption strategy updated for January. I've just got one comment on that, and that is on page 47, roles and responsibilities, councillors and elected members. Hopefully that members will agree. Where it's got the roles and responsibilities are clearly defined for councillors in part 6 of the council's constitution, entitled Members Code of Conduct. I would just like to have that included in that paragraph, and the Nolan principles for standards in public life. Do we agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
That's fine. I can have that included.
Thank you. Other than that, it's a good document. I think the amendments are sensible and well prepared. Yeah. Any other comments? Nope. I'll take you back to page 37. On those recommendations with just the additional insert that we've got with regards to the Nolan principles. We all agree with those? Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman.
No questions? It's good. I think we've come to the end of our agenda. So thank you all for coming, and we will close the meeting.